A few weeks ago, a young man knocked on the door at the parsonage. It was just a few minutes before dusk, and he was wondering if I could come out in the parking lot and help him change his tire. Now, frankly, it wasn't the best time for me. It was getting dark. I didn't know who this person was. The kids were in the middle of their bedtime routines. The dog was barking his head off. It just wasn't the best time for me. But for whatever reason, I found myself out there in the parking lot, and didn't take long before I found out a little bit about this young man. There was an empty car seat in the car. I found out that he gets to spend time with his kids every other weekend. I learned that he was a marijuana user. The car had that very distinct aroma. And after getting that tire off and seeing what the issue was, it wasn't just a flat tire. The whole rim was bent in on itself. And so he came clean and confessed that he was actually on his cell phone texting when he either ran into a pothole or ran off the road or something. He wasn't quite sure. He eventually learned in our conversation that I was a pastor. And it was one of those times when someone learns that information, they immediately start, being more aware of their behavior. And for this gentleman, it meant apologizing every other sentence when saying a curse word. We finally got his little spare put on the car, and he was grateful for the time that I spent helping him. But I kept wondering something after that experience. Did I spend that time wisely? Yes, I helped this person, but did I really? Yes, he could drive off again, but would it be down the exact same path? After his time with me, would he find a church? Would he be compelled to do something like that? Would he begin making the best of his time every other weekend with those kids of his? And instead of self-medicating on substances or cell phone distractions, would he discover the real ecstasy that comes with accepting and living into the grace of Jesus Christ? Well, I hope and pray so, but I don't know. What we can know is that there are many more like this young man, and sometimes we ourselves aren't much different from him. It might not be drugs, it might not be texting while driving, or maybe we just haven't been caught yet or torn up our car yet. Maybe it's food, maybe it's alcohol or sex, maybe it's some other kind of technology, social media, mindless Facebook scrolling. Maybe it's the consumption of news stories, especially negative or false ones, or partisan politics. We all have ways of self-medicating in order to distract ourselves from our own vices or the truth, or to just block out unpleasant realities in life. Yes, the days are evil, and people fall short. Paul, nor any other preacher today, has to spend much time convincing people of that. But Paul is not writing here to display one of his favorite axes to grind. He isn't just, for example, scolding people who drink. Our passage today, which I hope you've read, Ephesians 5:15 through 20, has much more to teach us than simply how to behave during the happy hour or cocktail reception. Paul is writing to the church in Ephesus. So the reason to bring up drunkenness is not to point out the town drunk, but to point out how self-medicated or distracted Christians are wasting the time God has given them. And To waste the time is to be unwise. This is a part of the letter that deals with wisdom. The Greek word Paul uses there that's translated into making the most of your time or some idea like that is a word that was often used in the marketplace, a word used for snapping up bargains. Get it while it's hot. Get it before it's gone. Grab it before it's gone. This is about the stewardship of time, making the most of a fleeting gift, using the gift of time wisely. So how do we do that? Well, we do live in a culture that is obsessed with using time wisely. Think of fast food, robotic vacuums, robotic lawnmowers, express lanes in the grocery store. All this decreases the amount of time that it takes so that we have more time left over. But left over for what? Left over for who? Exactly. I remember I had a teacher in middle school who would begin each class by pointing to this big sign he had on the wall. It said Carpe Diem, a Latin phrase that means to seize the day, or basically make the most of your time. Yeah, well, that's fine and all. Make the most of your time. I think of the gift of how many of you remind me that the days are only going to get faster the older that I get, and so really soak in these early years with Lily and Levi. I'm grateful for that reminder, and making the most of that time is certainly a good thing. It's just that when my middle school teacher pointed to that Carpe Diem sign every day, I don't think it was meant in the same way that Paul might express that idea. Okay, seize the day, sure. Make the most of your time, great, but not for personal gain, not for personal fulfillment. The time, after all, belongs to God. So seize the day for Christ. Seize the day for His purpose. Paul is saying that wise Christians are those who receive the time they've been given to live and work for Christ. It is therefore obviously unwise for Christians then to be intoxicated or distracted, as it wastes the time we've been given by behaving in a way that renders us useless to the work of Christ. How can you spread the love of Christ when you're passed out in a bar? How can you share the love of Christ even when glued to a TV or phone screen all day? How can you share the gospel when you're distracted by anything, including even these evil days? Well, to those who have chosen self-medication, or to those who have become one of those ain't it awful Christians, Paul writes us a much better prescription. He says, even though these days are evil, and many people will, even in the midst of this evil, or because of these evil days, might choose the loss of self-control, or might choose overindulgence or distraction. I want y'all to choose praise. I want y'all to choose a worshipful life. And he goes on about these different songs to sing. I want y'all, in other words, I want y'all to be filled with the Spirit. This is how you can use the time wisely. Frederick Buechner once wrote, "One winter I sat in army fatigues somewhere near Anniston, Alabama, eating my supper out of a mess kit. There was a cold drizzle of rain, and everything was mud. The sun had gone down. I was still hungry when I finished and noticed that a man nearby had left something that he was not going to eat. It was a turnip. When I asked him if I could have it, he tossed it over to me. I missed the catch, and the turnip fell to the ground. But I wanted it so badly that I picked it up and started eating it. mud and all. Time deepened and slowed down. With a lurch of the heart, I saw suddenly that not only was the turnip good, but the mud was good too. Even the drizzle and cold were good. Even the army that I had dreaded for months was good. Sitting there in the Alabama winter with my mouth full of cold turnip and mud, I could see, at least for a moment, how if you ever took truly to heart the ultimate goodness and joy of things, even at their bleakest, the need to praise someone or something for it would be so great that you might even have to go out and speak of it to the birds of the air. Now, I don't know, after reading something like that, if I made the best of that time with the young man in the parking lot. I suspect I only felt the sweat dripping off the tip of my nose in the summer heat, wondering why in the world I'm busting my butt out here, for this guy who obviously should have been paying attention. I suspect I only heard his cussing, and I suspect I only smelled that marijuana. But maybe that young man's brief time with me was the first time he'd ever been in a church parking lot, getting help from someone who really ought to have been using that time more wisely. Maybe if I'd taken the time to notice, there would have been other things to smell, other things to hear, other things to feel, and certainly there were other things I could have said. As someone who claims to be filled with the Spirit, did my life that night seem any more appealing or exciting than the kind of life he already knew? Do our lives, especially when we gather together for worship, do they seem appealing? Does it appear that we've found something better than chemical substances or distractions? At age 47, Julio Franco became the oldest player in Major League Baseball to hit a home run. And then the very next week later, he became the oldest person in 97 years to steal a base. So other players began to doubt that he was able to stay in such tip-top shape on natural training alone. So he was finally accused of using steroids. And Franco made the best of his time, because here's what he said. Tell them they're right. I'm on the best juice there is. I'm juiced up every day, and the name of my juice is Jesus. I'm on His power, His understanding, His wisdom. Amen.